Hi, welcome to the Monthly Dose. My name is Elaine Chang, and I'm your host here today with the Chief Medical Officer of IMI, my co-host, Dr. Charles Ackel.
Delighted to meet you.
Thank you for having us. This is an educational series about immunity, longevity, and the health of your microbiome produced by IMI. Let's get started, shall we?
Excellent.
Today we're talking diet, lifestyle, and the environment. We'd love to learn more about how this impacts us and IMI as well. So the question I have for you first is actually just super hot topics. Robert, RFK is talking about these things called seed oils, no refined sugars. How do we escape ultra-processed foods? We talk a lot about you are what you eat. And is that true?
Yes.
How does that work in a microbiome perspective?
Well, it's always said that you are what you eat. And these microbiome are really like a farm. You've got to farm it. You've got to put fertilizer. You've got to put the seed in. It's a complex system.
Tend to the garden.
Yeah, you got to tend to your garden, decide what flowers and what are the weeds and what are the thing. And but the problem is some things just encourage the growth of weeds, and something encourage the growth of flowers. And so these seed oils, these ultra processed materials that are the E numbers. Some of the E numbers are very toxic, and encourage the bad boys, the weeds to grow, and you don't want that in your garden. And the Western diet with the excess of sugar doesn't help, because, again, the sugar encourages the wrong kind of bacteria to grow.
And with that kind of bad bacteria, we have inflammatory processes. What does that look like?
So we believe, and lots of has been published so far, that the good bacteria, and by the way, it's diversity that matters in the microbiome. So you need lots and lots and lots of different bacteria. There are lots of people trying to sell you that there's one bacterium or 5 bacteria that are critical. They're all important, but it's diversity. And one of the problems with diversity is that if you encourage the growth of the bad bacteria, they secrete products that are actually going to damage their other bacteria and you. And the classic case are things like, we know short-chain fatty acid production is good. We know the butyrates are good. We know even some testosterone is produced. We know that the GLP-1 material is produced. There's all sorts of good things that these bacteria can do, because they're factories. Mm-hmm. But equally, if you get the bad bacteria, they start secreting bad products which are potentially damaging to the lining of the gut. They make a leaky gut, which a lot of people have heard of, and that doesn't help. And all the way up to carcinogenesis. And one of the side effects that we're seeing today is this dramatic growth of young cancers under the age of 50. We think that that's a bad set of gardening, producing toxins.
Primarily related to your diet or to the Western diet, exactly?
Well, the diet is a huge factor, but there are things out there, including pollution. There are toxins in the environment that don't help us. So all of these things are factors, but the one thing you can do about, you can take control of, is your own diet. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these toxins, it may be possible to catch them and get rid of them by using fiber. And so we've always believed that actually fiber is quite important. And one of the big factors that you can easily do something about in a Western diet is add fiber to your diet. Average American takes probably 12 grams of fiber, which is nothing. You should be taking 30 grams and more of fiber. And it's very easy to adapt that. So why wouldn't you do it?
Mm-hmm. And then a lot of this is actually about balancing the good with the bad, right? So for the good, you mentioned eating fiber, perhaps fermented foods, introducing a lot of plants-based, not just potatoes or starches, but just the good kind of plants. When we're balancing the good and the bad, why is it important for this balance rather than a lot of times we just try to avoid the bad? What is the balance that we're searching for here?
Well, we're trying to push things towards the good, aren't we? Balances are always, they go up and down, and you get variability. But it's absolutely essential that you feed your bacteria good stuff. And that tends to be in the Western diet, avoiding the bad stuff. But adding things like olive oil is really, the bugs love that. If you like colored beans, seeds, whatever, these are all excellent material that the bugs love. They like to eat that. And so give them the food that they want. If you've got a favorite pet, you give them their treats.
Totally.
Yeah. So why wouldn't you do that with the food that you give them? Absolutely.
And I guess we can say, blanket statement here, but I guess we can say across the board, the American diet's pretty trash. We're eating a lot of trashy things. It's turning our garden into trash. What are those inflammatory processes that are coming out of it? And are there ways to address that?
Yes, I'm inclined to agree. I don't just want to blame poor old America for bad food. I mean, there are some societies that have atrocious diets.
Right.
There's a particular group in Asia where they eat fermented cabbage that's been buried for 10 years, and then they wonder why they've got a massive incidence of esophageal cancer, right?
Oh, wow.
So and that's nitrosamines in the soil and stuff like that. So we can't just blame the Americans for everything, much as we like to.
Yeah.
But the Mediterranean diet is one that's always been hyped as being very good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, it's based on things like olive oil, unsaturated fats, healthy fresh fruit and vegetables, citrus, lots of beans and fish, and protein is under control. So yeah, the Mediterranean diet is good.
How would you compare the Mediterranean with the standard American diet? It's known as SAD, but it could potentially, what you said, lower forms of fiber, higher amounts of inflammatory seed oils, refined sugars.
And additives. The problem with the American diet is that it's nice to eat. It's very addictive. There are lots of delicious crisps and the products there that are truly addictive. And in fact, probably some of the companies use that to their advantage by putting additives that the kids like to eat. Mm-hmm. I love American ice cream and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure that I'm getting the genuine stuff that might be healthy for me. And sometimes it doesn't matter. But meat products, for example, a good American steak takes some beating. I mean, you can't beat American steak. It's fantastic. On the other hand, meat that's been processed and they've put all sorts of junk into it to make it last for months, and it sort of sits there in a packet and it doesn't go off, and you think, hang on, that's not right, that's not natural. Those products that are inserted into the meat tend to have bad effects, particularly on your garden, on your microbiome, because it encourages the bad boys to grow, not the good guys. The good guys don't like, junk food.
Totally. So I mean, safe to say that it's very difficult to avoid the bad stuff. If you're in a modern environment, modern society, most things are packaged, most things are processed. How do we address that?
Well, the problem is it's also cost, isn't it? That people who have a limited budget, it's much easier to buy food that's been processed. It's cheap, it's easy, it's nutritious in terms of keeping you alive, right? Mm-hmm. But not necessarily the quality of life. So it costs money sometimes. And I think that you just have to make sure that you try and eat a diet that is going to be sensible and healthy without getting too obsessed. A bit of junk food probably won't do you any harm, but living on it is another matter.
Totally. And you're experiencing that inflammation. You know that feeling when you get that bloating and you just don't know what you ate, but everything hurts.
Yeah.
How does IMI help address that?
So that variation we used to call, and we still call, irritable bowel syndrome. It's so
IBS.
common. IBS is a hugely common problem, isn't it? And one of the best ways of immediately sorting it out is to add fiber. If you do nothing else, just at least add fiber, because that gives something it's a prebiotic. It helps the bacteria to grow. But IMI is also a factor into these things, because one of the things it does is to try and regulate the inflammatory process. It reduces that chronic inflammation that is triggered by the bad boys. Mm-hmm. And it helps to regulate it, particularly in terms of keeping that gut-brain axis. It has an effect on the gut-brain axis to control the activity of the bowel. So IMI is really important in that. But on its own, it's not enough. You need to get something for it to work on.
Absolutely. So more on the gut-brain axis later. It's an extremely important topic, right? But as we talk about, that process where you feel the inflammation, you need to have fiber in your system. IMI can help assist as an agent. Specifically in that case, like what might you feel pre and post IMI if you're experiencing digestive issues like IBS or other?
Well, the wonderful thing is that the research that we've done on IMI, and by the way, unlike a lot of other products, we've spent over $100 million researching these mycolicid bacteria in cancer, TB, etc. So we didn't just make this up overnight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unlike other people who purport to have dietary magic in trials where they've had, say, 3 people in their trial, it's nonsense. So there's a lot of rubbish talked out there. But in terms of IMI, we know that it has a chronic anti-inflammatory effect. And chronic inflammation is the bad thing that we're trying to deal with. We know it helps with energy processing, so particularly things like diabetes and what have you. There are lots of effects that IMI does, but the baseline is chronic inflammation. But you still need to pay attention to get your diet organized, avoid some of those foods that will cause problems. Otherwise, IMI is just not going to work.
Specifically with diabetes, you mentioned that there was significant impact here from a research standpoint.
Yeah, we've just published a very nice paper in terms of, in a model of prevention of type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is the insulin-dependent diabetes, and the results are amazing. And it's all about energy activation. So, for example, in cancer patients, when you see patients who've got advanced cancer, they're very hollow-cheeked and they waste away in front of you. That's an energy production because the cancer steals the energy from the host. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's been well demonstrated that the mitochondria, which are the energizer batteries, like the Energizer Bunny.
Duracell Bunny, yeah.
Yeah, the Energizer Duracell Bunny, whatever. He loses his batteries to the cancer. The bad boys come and steal the thing. And then they put the junk batteries back in again. It's incredible what cancer can do. But we know IMI has an effect on preventing that damage to the energy system, because everything needs energy to work, right? Whatever it is, you can't drive a car without having some sort of energy, right? You can't drive a body. You got to have energy. That's what food's all about. So, and cancer can't grow without energy, which is, all part of how this Wahlberg effect, etc., that people try to do with fasting to get ketogenic diet to try and stop cancer, etc., etc. So it gets quite complicated. The whole energy process is complex. But the diabetes is a big factor. We know that obesity is a factor for diabetes. Why? Because obesity produces chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation is the bugbear of diabetes, which is why obesity, which is why you get diabetes, you get cancer, you get all sorts of other problems with obesity.
Right.
So IMI is a way of trying to help that. But you've also got to work yourself on getting a bit of exercise, getting your diet organized, etc. But the IMI is very powerful medicine.
Then, regardless of cancer or diabetes, you're talking about low energy. Almost everyone experiences low energy in some form, and we don't actually know that that reflects inflammation. So IMI can actually help anyone who's kind of experiencing that fatigue, that lethargy, that brain fog. Is that fair?
That seems to be the effect in the research in terms of the pathways, energy pathways. It seems to help. But what we rely on has been exactly what patients tell us, and more importantly, what people who are taking IMI tell us, which is that they sleep better, they seem to function better with it, and we rely on that data. We know in the patients that had cancer that we treated with similar bacteria, that the effect of the bacteria was fantastic, that they got much better sleep, they didn't lose weight so much, they coped with the stress of having cancer, and boy, having cancer is pretty stressful. So we know that it has an effect, and that's really why we've used IMI for stress, because of all that data that we can lean on over the years in relation to cancer and those patients.
A lot of people may not even put together the fact that taking a supplement that aids your microbiome is going to address your stress. And we can get into that a little bit later with the gut-brain axis. But essentially, it's an underlooked thing that the way that how healthy your microbiome is directly connected to your mood and therefore directly connected to your stress. Is that fair?
Yeah. The microbiome, the microbiome is a hot topic now. For example, a paper was published about the microbiome in violent prisoners, and it's completely different to that in ordinary people. Now, that's quite difficult. 'Cause we don't really know what an ordinary microbiome is. I mean, people talk about it, but actually your microbiome is as individual as you. You could do, it's like your fingerprint.
Wow.
Every single person has a different microbiome. So we know that stress and changes in the microbiome absolutely linked. And I've just told you about the violent behavior, for example. We know that people who are very tired and, not functioning properly, their microbiome is up the creek. We know that people who are obese, their microbiome's up the creek. We know that people who are aging badly, their microbiome's up the creek.
Up the creek meaning poor.
Meaning it's very bad and not functioning properly. And so 100-year-olds who are living well and still, in the so-called blue zones that can run up a mountain aged 100, they have the microbiome of a 20-year-old, which is wonderful, right? So we're still dealing with subjective rather than strong objective data, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And this actually kind of makes me think about environments that we're in, right? Where you mentioned to me before that in our environments, we need exposure to not only bad bacteria, not only good bacteria, but also bad bacteria. So what does this balance look like, and how come our modern environments don't support that?
Well, you need to understand either the hygiene hypothesis, which used to say that a little bit of dirt does you good, right? Like your grandmother would tell you, or more importantly, what we call the old friends hypothesis, which was promulgated by people like Professor Graham Rook. And that is predicated on three things. One, that your immune system is the fundamental. That's understood. Then the immune system needs training. And one of the ways it gets trained is by exposure to infections, particularly in childhood and through your life. So if you've had lots of viral infections as a kid, you tend to make a stronger adult. Right?
Wow, really?
Yeah, the kid that's never had an infection, is not good. Now, of course, some of these things can kill you, but generally what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Cool.
So that's one avenue. The second avenue is exposure to environmental worms and helminths, which are parasites of one sort or another, which actually seem to prevent us getting asthma and allergies.
Specifically those.
Yeah. So, for example, I think it was in Vietnam, they decided to deworm all the children at school on one day. And all the school children were dewormed, and the incidence of eczema and asthma shot up by 20%.
No way.
Absolutely. And probably even with our pets, we're deworming them a little bit too aggressively, because now we're seeing asthma and eczema and stuff in our dogs and cats and what have you. And is that a good thing? Not sure. So trying to get people to eat worms may not be such a great idea.
Your campaign.
Yeah, well, the kids sometimes dare each other to eat a worm, and that's maybe you shouldn't completely, but we're talking about parasitic worms as opposed to earthworms, right? So then the third thing are what we call environmental commensals. These are environmental bacteria with which we live. Now, when we were creatures living in the forest and in the countryside, we had exposure to mud and water. And these bacteria, in particular the mycolysibacteria, live in mud and water. And exposure to them strengthens your immune system. There's no question that it acts as an immunoadjuvant, an immunomodulator, which are terms that we can explain later. They're big words. But they do you good because they're tuning your immune system. And that's undoubtedly an important case. And that's why we chose IMI, because it's it's the poster child, if you like, for these environmental bacteria that are no longer present in our westernized environment.
Over-sterilized environments. Yeah.
Over-sterilized, it's concrete jungle, everything is clean.
Very far from a forest. So are you a proponent of us eating dirt?
That's a great question. I may have told you there's a chef in Japan who actually serves dirt as part of his...
Expensive or affordable?
Oh, no, it's expensive. It's really expensive dirt. So he thinks it's a great idea. Mm-hmm. We know, for example, that animals will often eat dirt because there's a deficit in their diet. And in South America particularly, there are areas where animals congregate in the forest and in the jungle to eat clay, particularly the clay, because that seems to have an effect on their gut to either kill parasites, and also because it probably contains nutrients that aren't available in their natural diet. And then even humans have done it. So there's a church in New Mexico, Chimao, in New Mexico, where the eating the earth has a miraculous effect, supposedly. So the people go down there on a pilgrimage just to eat the dirt. And then we all see kids eating dirt, right? And
they're onto something.
Well, the kids eat dirt. We always used to think that was probably due to the fact that they were iron deficient, and the syndrome's called pica, P-I-C-A, and the children would eat dirt, and immediately you think, oh my goodness, they've got iron deficiency, and certainly some of them do. But kids will eat dirt, and they're rolling around in it, and that's the way it should be, you know. But there's good dirt and bad dirt. We don't want them rolling around in you know, dog poo or whatever.
Right.
It's got toxocara and other parasites. That's not a good idea.
You be very specific about what kind of poo and what kind of dirt you're getting.
Yeah, you got to be a bit careful. But going out into the countryside and having a walk in the garden is wonderful. So in Scandinavia, they bring to the children's playgrounds, they bring cuttings from trees and the forests and what have you. They lay it all on the floor of the playgrounds, and the children play in this environment. And this has been published data that these children are less stressed, they're healthier, they have less asthma than those that just have on a concrete playground.
So you're saying that the exposure to these leaves, exposure to healthy forms of bacteria are building resilience long term?
Absolutely.
Wow. That's crazy.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So a walk in the forest or a walk in the countryside is really good for you, not just because it's just lovely to be out there, but particularly if you've got a dog or you've got a pet that you take with you. So having a dog is also terribly important. So families that have dogs as pets, their children are less likely to get asthma and eczema than those who don't.
That's very pro-pet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pro-pet.
Yeah, you're
okay.
pro-pet. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're officially pro-pet at Team Emmy because now apparently builds your resilience. The exposure is so important, right? We were telling me earlier that you said 3% of the microbiome is based on your diet. So the other 90-something% is truly through exposure, through your environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of factors. That 3% shocks people,
right?
But it's actually a very important 3%. But the study that was published in Cell just recently was they checked the microbiome, and 3% comes from the food that you eat. But an awful lot of the other stuff comes from the people you have contact with or your pets, or you inherit. So you share, a baby will share 50% of its microbiome with its mother. And I think I told you about in France, if a child is born naturally, that's fine because they get exposed to the mother's feces and colonize. But if the baby's born by cesarean section,
no exposure to the vaginal canal or the microbiome.
Or the rectal.
Or the rectal.
Yeah. So both. And the midwife will take a little bit of the mother's poo and actually smear it on the baby. I know it sounds gross, but
it's natural. I mean, I think it's a little known fact that when women give birth, they're pooping, they're defecating. And that exposure through the vaginal canal to the baby is extremely important in their first, we start our relationship with bacteria from day one.
Absolutely. I mean, if it was men having babies, I think the human race would be extinct in one generation. Right?
No, we didn't keep it.
Yeah, but this is natural. It's normal. And so it's not as crazy as it sounds because nature put those two areas together, close together for a good reason.
Oh, it's all tying together. Yeah.
And so, again, that's not to say that if you're in the middle of a cholera epidemic, you contaminate. But generally, if you're careful and sensible, a little bit of dirt is actually good for you. That's that's not in doubt. Children, if you have pets in the family, particularly a pet dog, or the effect on stress and asthma and all these other things is actually quite traumatic.
Interesting.
Yeah, dirty older brother's good too.
Okay, so there's no percentages we can follow. We can't say that 3% of your microbiome is based on what you eat, 15% from your partner, maybe 50% you inherit from your mom.
I mean, probably 50% from your mom. There's 20% from your partner, particularly if he gives you lots of hugs and kisses. That's always good.
Yeah.
And then if you live in an environment with an extended family, they share quite a lot of that microbiome.
Through touch.
Through touch, contact living, eating together. They eat the same kind of food. They touch each other. They hug each other. So that is a shared environment. But that 3% is really important. But it just shows that it's diversity, and it's not the be-all and end-all. There is a huge amount of environmental contact that you need. You need diversity. That's the thing. If you learn nothing else, diversity is the key. Not a specific bacterium. You don't want one specific flower in your garden that you only grow one particular rose. You want as many different flowers as possible.
You need biodiversity, specifically what you get in touch with when you're in nature. So don't be in a concrete jungle all the time. Try not to stay in over-sterilized places. Get some exposure to dirt, some leaves. Maybe if you're not, take some IMI because you can help recreate the forest experience with our little liquid gold capsule.
That's it. Take your IMI. It's a little bit of gold in your hands. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Okay, so longevity supplements are a big topic now, but really it just boils down to your diet, your sleep, your exercise. A lot of people don't know that when you exercise, you're actually benefiting your microbiome. But how does that work?
Well, we don't know for sure how that works, except that probably by utilizing the energy, it's all about energy at the bottom line. So probably by using up and creating energy, the bacteria getting a benefit in some way, and whether it's a byproduct of the energy material, cyclic AMP and all sorts of big other words which we won't go into, or whether they contribute, we don't know for sure. But unquestionably, exercise and benefit in terms of health are great. If you look at the blue zones, which are defined as those areas where there are more centenarians than anywhere else, and if you believe it, generally they're still very active. They're physically active as well as mentally active and healthy in other respects. And that's really what we aspire to. And their microbiomes resemble the microbiome of a 20-year-old.
No matter what age they are.
No, if they're 80, 90, 100, they still got this young-looking microbiome. And that's fascinating. So the idea is to try and maintain your microbiome as healthy as you can. And that means farming and looking after your microbiome garden. Yeah. You've got to feed it. You've got to, look after it. And you've got to keep inflammation to a minimum, because it's chronic inflammation that is the problem. Inflammation is a big topic, and we've touched on it, and you need to understand the difference between acute and chronic. But basically, chronic inflammation is a bad idea because it goes on and on and on and on. And it doesn't do any good. So in terms of diet and exercise, you can overdo exercise. So we know that in elite athletes, and especially also people who suddenly realize, okay, I've got to do some exercise, right? I'm going to lose 20 pounds, and I'm going to have a six-pack in 3 weeks. And they go crazy and they start doing too much exercise. They're actually not doing themselves any favor.
It's possible to do too much exercise.
Yeah. And actually the evidence is, if you overdo the exercise, and this is where sometimes elite athletes who are pushed hard, they immunosuppress. They actually get an inflammatory process that prevents them responding well to viruses. So they get viral infections very quickly. Wow. They don't do well, and they get injuries. And that's why they give them these ice cold baths and ultrasound and all that sort of stuff.
Just Band-Aids, right?
Yeah.
But and so what does that link to? That's basically saying, are they not getting enough nutrients, not enough rest, recovery? What does that mean for them?
They're just overdoing it. I mean, if you look at the elite athletes, they've got people sitting there giving them diets and all that other stuff. There's no shortage of attention. What it is it's just doing too much. And it's like everything else in life. You've got to strike a sensible balance between doing too much and too little. And for us ordinary people, we don't want to necessarily go and win the next Olympics or look like some hunk with, six-pack. Nice that it would be.
I don't know.
But we just want to be fit and enjoy ourselves. And I think that's really achieve the achievable is the answer.
Well, also the resilience of your microbiome also addresses the impact in the recovery, right? You mentioned that if someone is from the farmland and you have someone from the city, you can chronically stress both of them, but the recovery time is significantly different for someone who has exposure to the forest, has exposure to diversity.
Yes, it's actually acute stress that's the thing. So this experiment has been done, published by my friends Chris Lowry and Professor Stefan Reber in Germany, and basically they took a bunch of city slickers and a bunch of country folk. And the city slickers were young men who'd not had any pets or exposure to animals and had, tough jobs. And the other guys worked on a farm and were quite normal. And what you do is you stress them. And you stress them by bringing them into a room and making them take a sort of exam with, two people in white coats sitting down, shouting questions at them. A bit like this, with microphone in your face.
It's basically where we are right now.
Yeah, so it's good I'm not freaked out by this. Yeah. But then you've got to do a dynamic measure. You can't just do static measures, because we can discuss that when we come to post-viral syndrome and fibromyalgia, which is another thing. But basically, if you do dynamic studies, the country lads get stressed because they're not used to this, and their adrenaline goes shooting up and their inflammatory markers go up. But as soon as the stress is finished, it comes back down again. So there is this beginning, middle, and an end that I talk about in acute inflammatory processes. Now, the problem is the city slickers, they start off with slightly higher figures to start with. They don't go up so high with the adrenaline because they're used to being shouted at by the boss and, somebody yelling at them with their car crossing the road or whatever it is. But when the thing comes back, their inflammatory markers take a lot longer to go back to normal. Their recovery time, their recovery index, if you like, is much slower. And so the city boys are chronically inflamed compared to the country lads. And that's not a good thing. And so they handle stress very badly compared with the guys in the country.
And this is tied to your microbiome.
That's tied to your microbiome. And that's why the fact that they don't have exposure to their environmental organisms enter IMI. Why would they not, why would they not go and have a walk in the park and roll around in the mud and all the rest of it? Well, because it's not there. So the best option is to get some, alternative, and IMI is the ideal alternative for these guys. And, we will do that experiment to demonstrate it in terms of the actual cytokine changes when we've done that in experimental models. But it's a no-brainer. If you look at the website and the responses that people have, they say, look, I slept better. Sleep is really important. I eat better. I feel better. Get your environmental mycobacteria. Get some IMI.
Sounds like we've taken a piece of nature. It's out there. We need it. We've moved very far away from it. We moved to our little concrete jungles, and we're very far from this nature and this bacteria that can really just be the thing that balances us all, helps us reach stasis and homeostasis. It's important to emphasize this baseline piece here.
Yes, and I think it's important that to understand that biological systems tend to go for homeostasis. And you want to try and achieve a level of homeostasis that is good for you. And the immune system needs training. I think you said use it or lose it, right? Mm-hmm. So your immune system is so important. It's the absolute fundamental to life. It repairs things, it stops us getting infection, and it defends us from attack by parasites or whatever, and even cancer and things like that. So it's an absolute fundamental. It needs energy, and so why wouldn't you help it? And one way to help it is to take IMI.
Yeah, immune system supplements are quite underrated. What I learned from you is the farm boys are cooler than the city boys. Pets are good for your exposure. Pets are good for your exposure. We can say pets are pro-longevity, pro-longevity. And really get out there. If you're not giving yourself exposure in nature, it's important to give yourself daily exposure to any type of healthy bacteria, something similar to what IMI is giving us.
Exactly.
Let's go into country boys first. So, my takeaway: city boys are overrated. Country boys have diverse microbiomes, right? But what if you are a country boy? Does that mean you don't need to start introducing healthy forms of bacteria like IMI into your diet? Some people might say they have healthy diets, or they might live they may not live in a city. They'll live somewhere more rural or more open. Why would they still need to include healthy bacteria in their diet?
Well, probably because the definition of a country person has changed. They tend to eat more processed foods than they should. Yes, they work with farms, but sometimes they're in this great big tractor with air conditioning, GPS and all the rest of it. So some of them are pretty sophisticated, right?
Yes.
So it depends at what level you're talking about.
True.
The guy who might be like the Amish, who actually don't use modern materials and things, they're pretty good. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they're quite tolerant to having asthma and allergies and things their kids do well compared with other farmers. So just because you're a country boy in modern United States doesn't mean you're not susceptible to having a deranged microbiome. So you too have to do your work. But the thing about IMI is that it doesn't necessarily alter the microbiome directly. It doesn't have an effect on the other bacteria directly. What it has is an effect on your immune response and your gut's response to the microbiome that you've created.
Right.
And it's that immune response that the IMI is involved with, and very important. And then it leads up with all this gut-brain axis data that we have. So I think everybody needs IMI, because even if you've got a perfect microbiome, if your immune system isn't functioning correctly and interacting properly with it, then you're not going to get the full benefit. And it's changing. What do we call a country boy? There are not many of those left now.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about that immune signaling response, that's important when we just talked about diet, exercise, and the things that you can do to improve that. You can eat all the fiber and the probiotic, prebiotic foods. You can exercise regularly. And how is IMI going to improve your immune system signaling to receive those lifestyle things to receive the lifestyle adjustments you're making?
Because it works on that interface, that lock between the microbiome and the body's immune system. Somehow it seems to have this effect of balancing, which is why we use the term immunomodulator, of balancing the response to that immune challenge triggered by the microbiome, all these bacteria with all these antigens and things. So it's the immune response in your body that really is the bottom line, okay? If you don't get a good immune response, whatever is going on in your gut, you're not going to do well. Having said that, it's like when the bad boys get into your gut, like if you've got a food poisoning organism there, for some reason, and probably what it is that the body's immune defenses are enhanced by taking IMI, stops that bad boy from getting into mischief in your body. So it's very important to understand that it's on the immune response that we're looking at. That's why you need the IMI. It's all very well doing it naturally, which it would be lovely, and a lot of people may well be able to do that. But in the long term, we all have periods when the defenses are down. Our protection is poor. For whatever reason, some things manage to get through and weaken us. And that's why you need to keep your guard up. And that's why things like IMI are so important, to make sure that you keep your weaponry safe so you can defend yourself.
It's like the immune system insurance plan to make sure you're ready for the rainy day. Yeah. They do say that the best day to fix a broken roof is when the sunshine is out.
There you go.
Something behind that.
There you go. And jam today or, bread tomorrow, whatever. You need to think ahead. And especially now, we've had this conversation about young cancers, people getting cancer in their 50s, the massive increase in Alzheimer's and stuff that is, affecting Western society. We can't be complacent. Something is very seriously wrong in our diets and in our microbiomes. We need to pay a real attention to that. Otherwise, there's going to be a big fallout.
Right. We need to do the work.
Yeah.
So I want to know about the future. Hot topic, though, poop pills, right? Fecal transplant matter, because you can actually improve your microbiome by taking the microbiome qualities in the form of poop in a capsule.
Yeah.
Are you pro poop pill or no?
I'm 1,000% pro poop pill. I know it sounds awful. And there are some other analogies that are the name, but the evidence for fecal transplantation is fantastic. In fact, probably every patient who is on immunotherapy for cancer ought to be on a poop pill, because the evidence is very strong that you can get up to 30 to 40% enhancement in survival, or certainly enhancement in response rates to immunotherapy, by having a change in your microbiome. Wow. That's been published. That's not in any doubt. It's extraordinary, right? Wow. And then we know that fecal transplantation is the treatment of choice for hospital-acquired infection, particularly the one called C. difficile. You get a 94% cure rate compared to giving a specific antibiotic called vancomycin of 40%, right? So there's a story in there somehow. We know, for example, in twin studies, that if you've got an obese twin and a thin twin and you cross-transplant them, you switch the effect. We know in diabetes it has an effect. So there are all these bits of information that tell us that changing your microbiome in a positive way is really, really important, really useful. Now, IMI works through that interaction between the microbiome and the immune system. It's that gatekeeper, if you like, that interface between the two. And that's why IMI is very, very, very important. And I think if you do a fecal transplant or you get your poop pill, you need your IMI as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. So hot take. In the future, people are taking poop pills. We're all doing fecal transplants.
Well, I mean, fecal transplant's quite complex, but the poop pills are really good.
Easy.
Yeah, just choose your donor carefully. I think,
If you're not ready for the poop pill, maybe start with IMI. Same.
Well, for sure, IMI is a good start. Yeah, we're working on a poop pill, actually. I mean, there are poop pills out there with maybe 20, 30 different bacteria. They're already on the market. They're being, the pharmaceutical companies are trying to do it. But when you understand that there are at least 40,000 different kinds of bacteria in your microbiome, I think 20 aren't going to cut it.
Right, totally. But you know what I think is really important is actually you need to qualify your poop donor, because I had a friend who was taking her boyfriend's poop and actually putting it into capsules, consuming it. And her boyfriend actually has a history of depressive mood, a history of depression.
Yeah.
So although her microbiome did improve with the poop pill consumption, she also started to exhibit some of the depressive effects.
There you go. And we know that these bacteria that in your gut are very, very effective. I mean, we know they produce, the beneficial effects tend to be the production of short-chain fatty acids. We know about butyrate. We know about other peptides that are produced, even a bit of testosterone.
Right.
GLP-1, which is very, very topical at the moment for treatment of not only of diabetes, but addiction and all sorts of things. So you've got a massive factory that a chemical factory in your microbiome that produce. And by the way, it's not just bacteria. We've talked about dark matter in the microbiome. There are viruses, fungi, and things that we don't even understand. So anybody who tells you they understand the microbiome fully is talking nonsense, because there's a lot of dark matter out there.
Yeah.
That we don't understand. So, the fecal transplants are going to be great, but look at the risk that you're talking about. We know that that kind of mood and depression can be, I've talked to you about violent behavior, for example. If that person has a tendency to violent behavior, in theory, that could be transmitted. Now, that's quite dangerous.
Okay.
So the jury's still out. It's got to be done properly, and that's why we're taking our time to get it done, to do it properly.
You're taking the time to do it properly. Awesome. Well, I learned a lot of things about the microbiome today. It's not just something that's stagnant, that exists within us. It's not an organ. It is truly it's a flowering garden, a forest, if you will. If you're taking antibiotics, you're basically taking a flamethrower and you're just torching the entire thing. It takes a long time, dedication to build up this microbiome. It's a combination of many factors via your diet, your lifestyle, who you spend time with, who you touch and get exposure from. And one good solution for that is also just introducing nature and other nature-formed bacteria into your microbiome system.
Yeah, natural generally is good. Having said that, you can't gainsay the effect of antibiotics, which have had a fantastic effect on saving lives.
Truly, yes.
And if your doctor says you need XYZ antibiotic, to save, you shouldn't just say no. But what you do is then you correct it. When I used to give antibiotics when I was in clinical practice, I always then made sure once the course was over that the patients had, they got some prebiotics. I gave them lactobacilli.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And of course, now that IMI is available, that's really important to try and protect time until that microbiome recovers. And they usually do recover. It provided your diet is good, it will recover. So it's very important that people to go away and think, oh, look, antibiotics are bad for you, you must never, ever touch them.
No,
the same way, meat is not good for you. That's just not true. An American steak takes some beating, right?
It's great.
Processed food, the rubbish that is processed and put in cellophane packs and sits there on the shelf for 6 months, there's something very wrong with that. Mm-hmm. That's not natural. So natural is good, and natural may not always be perfect.
Fair. I think that's a really great point you made. I think antibiotics are inescapable, because you will sometimes, or hopefully not, but you will sometimes get an infection that will require antibiotic treatment. What's in your stack post-antibiotic in that course you mentioned? What are some 3 non-negotiables that you should be taking to rebuild your microbiome?
Well, I think just prebiotics are really important because the ones that have been hammered need all the help and food that they can get, and particularly soluble fiber is really good. So I think that's a no-brainer. And people get, by the way, diarrhea and all sorts of things after antibiotics. It's quite common, isn't it? So that helps to deal with that. The second is I think they should be taking things like lactobacilli. And lactobacilli is cheap, easy. Live yogurt is brilliant. But you've got a whole bunch of other fermented products that are going to be really good once you're able to tolerate them. So things like kimchi, kefir, the shelves are full of, take your pick. Sauerkraut, whatever, I don't mind. I think fermented foods are pretty good. But I think also patience. Make sure that you're eating lots of fruit and vegetables. So one of the things I do is I juice. I'm a great believer. I go down to my local village shop. We live in the rural area in Herefordshire.
Farm boy.
Nobody knows where that is. But my local village shop, you can get 15 or 20 different kinds of fruit or vegetable. You only need a tiny amount. Or I don't know, squash ball is what I would say. And you put 20 or 30 of those in a liquidizer, liquidize them. It's magic.
30 plants a day, they say.
Yeah, well, if you can do 30, that's great. But it doesn't have to be all plants. But there are things like blueberries. The colored things are really important. Root vegetables are really good. I like ginger because it gives it a good taste. I like honey. By the way, honey is something that we seriously underrate. I think children should be having local honey because you've got all the pollen and stuff that gives them exposure and stops them getting allergic responses. And honey lasts forever.
Yeah.
Honey's been found in pharaohs' tombs and still tastes exactly the same 3,000 years later. Yeah.
Important though, because the bees are bringing the biodiversity for you. Whatever they
How good is that? Yeah, and local biodiversity. Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, honey, but real honey. I don't mean the sort of adulterated stuff in a plastic bottle.
No.
Real honey, for example. So I like honey, and I juice it, make it up so that it tastes nice. Some people don't like too much fructose and things, but it's not a problem for me. I find it really helpful. And that restores a lot of the goodness in terms of farming and feeding your garden.
Yeah, the garden. Garden always needs the garden needs a lot of tending.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can wrap this one up, but I would say we can finish with some hot takes. So, as a final wrap up, let's go through some quick questions. So, processed foods, in or out?
Oh, out.
Major out. Okay. Country versus city?
Country every time.
Every time. Okay. Poop pills or not?
Yeah.
And very finally, are we pro modern jungles, concrete jungles?
No.
Or out? Okay, it's time to move out of New York City.
Yeah, or get them to put gardens and grass and stuff.
Put some more central parks in there.
Yeah, get some more parks in there.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have today. Next time, we're going to cover some important things, specifically the gut-brain axis. So, see you in the next one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.